welcome to Pathways to Recovery. Krista Zaft is our guest today. She's a life coach whose story spans multiple layers of generational addiction. She's an adult child of alcoholic, a former spouse of someone in addiction, and a mother who's walked through the pain of watching her child suffer and recover. Her personal healing journey is through Al-Anon, ACA, and a community that has shaped her voice, her work, and her podcast presence. Ms. Krista, can you tell us about what brought you to the world of recovery, not just emotionally, but professionally?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Joshua. This is great. I think what brought me really to the world of recovery was walking through the addiction realm with my son. So before that, I was kind of pushing things down. I, of course, had acknowledged it, but I hadn't really dove into any recovery because I was really stuck in victim mode. I was, pushing things down. I was angry at everyone else and never really had the opportunity to really look at my own behavior and what was going on for me, which was a lot apparently. But when my son was in his addiction, I had already been on a healing journey. And so I think that really helped me in a lot of ways. But in a lot of other ways, I hadn't really dove into actual recovery and I didn't understand what that meant. And so I was kind of propelled backwards into this really codependent cycle with him. I really felt like I was starting to regress and I just didn't know how to help him. I was very hopeless. I felt helpless. It's a really dark, dark place to be in for a parent, for sure. And my struggles were so big that I think almost all of my life stuff had come up in that as well. And I didn't like who I was. I felt like I was drowning. I could see him drowning. And there kind of came a point when I had like this break, I call it, or awakening, whatever you want to call it. And I saw my son. I hadn't seen him for a while. And I saw him and he looked like death warmed over. And I knew in that moment something just kind of smacked me upside the head. And I knew that, I needed to get him some help. Like we needed to save his life and I needed help. So as a family, we did an intervention. We had a little bit of help, but we did an intervention. It was emotional. It was hard. Everything had to crack open and break open in order to get to that point. And I think in that moment, I realized that I needed recovery just as much as he did. Like I was in a bad state myself. And nobody would have known it from the outside because I kept up really big fronts and really big walls. And I was very much people pleaser and had felt like I had it all under control on the outside. And when he went into recovery, it was about a month into his recovery and we went to the facility that he was at, my ex-husband and I, and it was like meeting my son for the first time, like as an adult. I hadn't known him in that capacity. The words, the language he was using, just the presence that he had, and he had been diving into his recovery, and that place was not just saving his life, but he was really embracing it. And I knew in that moment that I could do that too, and that I had to really focus on myself. And, as he went on in recovery, things were coming up. He's like, Mom, you need to step back. You need to do this for you and you stop controlling the situation and stop doing all these behaviors. And I was like, what are you talking to me? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I really need to do my own recovery. So that's when I found Al-Anon and ACA, and I went to meetings and I started diving into the 12 steps. I'm kind of I guess you could say I'm a research person too. So I really just dove into everything I could get my hands on. I was reading all the time and listening to podcasts and I kind of did it from all angles. I knew I needed to address my own stuff, but I wanted to learn how to be a better parent for him too. And so I started listening to a lot of parent-to-parent podcasts. There's not a lot out there. I was in a parent group meeting as well on Zoom, and that really helped. And it was so funny because one of the things that the leader said in that group was, we get all these moms coming to this meeting, and the first question they ask is, well, I just need a handbook so I can fix my son. And we kind of chuckled about that because I had already been in recovery for a while. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I think I remember thinking in my head, I need that handbook. What I really needed was the handbook to me. So that's that's where my recovery journey started. And I'm honestly so grateful that it did.
Okay, so there's no handbook, right?
No, there's
Okay.
absolutely no handbook. I mean,
Well,
you
are
can dive
there
into different few things, but there's no handbook that's going to help you fix someone else.
Well, what resources as a parent with a child who's struggling in addiction, and I know as many people as I know in addiction, I know family members who have a loved one in addiction. What resources, what books, programs would you recommend?
Oh wow. You know what? I started to read just a little bit of the ACA stuff. For my situation specifically, I know not all parents go through this, but I have addiction in my family. My father was an alcoholic. I had married into someone who was struggling with substance abuse, and so I've been with it my whole life. And what I realized I needed was a lot of work on myself. But as a parent, I would definitely encourage people to find a parent group. There are support groups out there. I know that you just have to go searching for them, but they do have support groups for parents, so you can really get that parent to parent interaction, start understanding that you're not alone. There's a lot of shame and stigma that goes with that. There's a lot of guilt, huge mom guilt that you have to really look at and address and learn that you're not the cause of all the problems in the world, and that you have to let that go in order to start the healing process. But finding a parent group really helps you understand you're not alone. It helps you listen to other people's stories, and you realize that we're all walking similar paths, just in different shoes. And so it helps you gain some perspective on your life. And it really helps you understand that you need to start taking care of yourself. Another resource for sure is Al-Anon. You don't have to be a spouse of someone who is in addiction. It's a kind of a conglomerate of parents of people in substance abuse, spouses, children of alcoholics. It's kind of a mixture. The 12-step groups aren't for everyone. I understand that, but there are a lot of resources and books out there. I had this doctor, his name is Brian Lequanen, on my show, on my podcast a while ago, and he wrote a book called How to Get Your Resisting Loved Ones into Treatment. And when I read it before I met him, and I thought, oh, this is just going to be one of those, how do you talk your kid into or your loved one into getting into treatment? And it was anything but. It was about what kind of language that we're using, how to really support someone who is struggling with an addiction, and not trying to fix them all the time, not trying to, I know, it's just the language. It's, not trying to be the savior, or maybe the tough love thing. A lot of parents hear that, well,
Yeah,
sometimes you just got to close the door, or you need tough love. And honestly, that's not the answer either. It's so much more than that. And I think his book was phenomenal in helping parents or family members understand the struggle from both sides, what you're going through, what they're going through, the kind of language that they need to hear, this how and when and where to support them without allowing yourself to just disintegrate in the process, right? So I think that book is great. I can give you the link if you want. I can share it with people.
absolutely, absolutely, and I'll
Yeah,
drop that
that was
in
a
the.
phenomenal book. Yeah.
What's an insight that you've gained about yourself, and how did you come to that realization?
Oh, wow. It's kind of an open-ended question because I could think of 10, but you know what? A realization about myself is that I really am not alone on this journey. And that when we try to struggle, and I try to struggle alone, I wasn't getting anywhere. It's like, treading water and never being able to swim to the shore. So I really understood that I needed community around me. I needed people who were walking in the same path, who could help me with my own struggles. I had developed such deep programming about how I think I can control everything, very hypervigilant, very just the properties that you develop when you're a kid for survival. It just doesn't serve you in life, but I had hung on to those so desperately, and I always felt like I was really alone, like other people were just not struggling with this. And if I spoke my truth and I really put myself out there, I would be judged. There was shame involved, there was guilt, and a lot of people just want to cover that up, and I was definitely one of those people. So I think the realization is that I am much stronger than I give myself credit for, and I have a lot of gifts to give if I just open up and be vulnerable and allow myself to accept help. Really, I think one of the toughest questions, toughest realizations we have is that we can ask for help. So
There's a lot of stigma for people that are going through addiction recovery. For someone who has a loved one that is in addiction, what's a misconception that they may have about emotional recovery and the need to work on themselves, like what they need to work on?
mm. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it. And I don't know if this is a misconception or something that I think people are afraid to actually address or see in themselves, is personal responsibility. It's kind of drawing the line between how do I help myself and take responsibility for my own stuff, and stop playing the victim part, right? So I think there's this misconception that we are victims all the time, and we can stay stuck in that mode. And I know that that's not where growth and healing come from. It's certainly not where emotional sobriety comes in when you stay in that victim mode, right? And I think a lot of it is people just have this notion that the addiction and the substance use is that person's problem. And if they would just stop, if they would just do this, if they would just do that. And we're always projecting our ideas and our thoughts onto what's happening outside of us. And we forget to look inside and say, hey, like, how am I contributing to this? How am I making this better or worse? How am I showing up in my life and that person's life in the most supportive way? We don't do that a lot. We usually are quick to push things away from us and to judge the substance abuse and all this stuff and blame a lot. But I think taking personal responsibility is huge, and most people don't. They kind of miss that part because it's scary. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's scary. There's a lot of shame there.
So you mentioned emotional sobriety, and my hope is that that becomes a buzzword and that more people learn what that means and that it's a thing. How would you define emotional sobriety? Why is it essential in families affected by addiction?
Oh, it kind of runs the same along the same path as being stuck in victim mode. You know, if you want to have, if you want to understand yourself better, if you want to understand the people around you and feel more connected to people, you really have to take responsibility for your own emotional regulation. I was in a state for many years where I could not regulate my emotions and I didn't understand why. And this isn't just for people who come from a history or a generational addiction. This is for everyone. I think in everyone's life, you come to a point where you're like, maybe I need to look inside myself and see how I'm reacting to things, how I'm showing up. emotionally, mentally in situations um, in relationships, how you're actually performing in your day to day, emotionally. I would
Mm-hmm.
go from angry to crying in, zero point 0.3 seconds and not understand why. And I really had to look and start getting curious with myself and saying, why am I reacting like this? Why am I afraid of confrontation? Why are all these emotions boiling up every time someone says something that doesn't go my way, or that isn't doesn't resonate with me, or I think they should say or do? And that really has to do with your own emotional, what's going on inside yourself, your emotional safety, your emotional regulation. We
Mm-hmm.
can't do and be better for ourselves if we aren't willing to look at what's going on inside ourselves. And that is not just taking responsibility for our emotional health, but really asking yourself, like, why am I doing these things? And it could be programming from years and years ago, and you're actually just existing in that space without really an awareness of where it's coming from or what's going on. And in order to bring it into awareness, you have to have a desire to show up differently in your life. You have to have a willingness and a want to, I think, react better, do better, right? So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
emotional sobriety is really, how am I showing up emotionally for myself? Am I trusting? Am I able to regulate my emotions and ask myself questions about the situation in front of me before I react? Am I able to have a conversation with someone and not get heated or angry? Be able to use my words instead of allowing my emotions to get the better of me. So I think it's really just, I think it's really coming into yourself and asking yourself some really tough questions. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
personal responsibility comes in too, right? It's with our whole emotional house and our mental house, everything.
This is an intimate question, but how did your family system shape the beliefs that you had about love, emotional safety, or safety, and identity?
Yeah, growing up in alcoholism, for sure, there was a lot of chaos, a lot of spaces that weren't safe. So emotional safety felt kind of sporadic here and there. I did grow up, there was love in our family for sure. And there were a lot of great things about my childhood. My dad was a great guy, and he was also not a great guy. As an alcoholic, the alcoholic part of him was scary and unpredictable. And there was a lot of fighting going on in our house. I did feel love, but I think that compromised my own sense of love, like love for myself. There was a lot of secrecy. There was a lot of shame and guilt around that. And so you really develop these characteristics of building walls around yourself. So I don't think really emotional safety was something that you don't think about as a kid for sure, but I don't think it was really being developed in me. And so I built up a lot of walls. I closed myself off. I detached a lot. And that keeps you from really being able to fully love yourself and therefore love other people in a capacity that you would want, right? It affects your relationships later on in life. Um, you just don't feel safe to express yourself and to really trust other people. And so you always kind of keep these guards up. Hypervigilance is one thing that I really developed at a young age, and that really keeps you separate from people in a certain way. I didn't know what was going to happen or what was going to be going on at my house at any given time, and so you don't know what you're walking into, and so you start trying to manipulate the situation. You start to, if I do this better, if I'm really good at school, or if I come home and clean the whole house, if I get supper started for mom, maybe things won't be as chaotic. If we dump all the booze out, if I hide it on my dad, maybe he won't drink it. Maybe if I was a better person, or maybe if I did better, or I, listened to my mom and my dad, maybe that they won't be the way they are, right? And I think these
Mm-hmm.
are little things that kids develop, and that really internalizes our sense of self, our identity, that capacity for self-love just doesn't develop the same as a kid who's in a really stable environment. My parents loved me, and we had all we needed, a roof over our head and food on the table, and it wasn't all bad, uh, but those moments and those times when there is chaos and when there is unpredictability, you just that's a really strong programming, and you carry that with you through your life, and I became a very angry teenager, and so I pushed a lot of people away. I also became highly people pleasing, and so I wasn't listening to my own self, my own needs, and I was also a perfectionist. So I thought if everything was perfect all the time, then I could avoid the hurt, the pain, the chaos. But what you're also avoiding is the capacity to love. And so that really shaped how I showed up for myself and other people in relationships, even with my kids. And that's when it started to really present itself, was with when I had kids. I realized um, a lot of these things from my past were starting to affect my parenting and how I was showing up for my kids, because I was very emotionally unregulated, and I could see how it was affecting them. So when you go through that as a child and you don't feel safe, or you don't feel that you were truly loved in the way you needed to be, that really affects how you show up in your adult life. And so I think it has a profound effect on adults growing up in a home where you just didn't feel safe. I felt loved, but I didn't. I I saw other families and other people doing it differently, and I always wondered, why isn't my life like that? And so then you go into life and you just pretend that you can forge this path for yourself that's going to look perfect in every way. And it is the furthest thing from the truth, right? You're just setting yourself up for huge disappointments in life, right? So yeah, it's has a really huge effect on kids. And what's really seen as complex PTSD now in kind of therapy language is that
Hmm.
all of those little programmings over time really break down that identity that a child is trying to form, and that self-love, that being able to take care of yourself, being able to really show up as your authentic self, that really gets hidden as a child. So we don't learn the same way.
With your experience and your recovery, um, you've taken this into your podcast, Becoming Sound, and this is a theme. And as we discussed, it's not a readily available theme. It's not talked about as much, and it's really needed. If someone wanted to listen to your podcast or maybe sign up for your coaching, what all do you provide? What would that look like? Where would they find you?
Yeah, you know what? I started the podcast because I was looking for people who were like me. I was searching for that voice that I could hear myself in and kind of identify with how alone I felt. Um, all of the stuff that was coming up for me, I really wasn't hearing it on social media even at the time. And I found only kind of a handful of podcasts that really dealt with adult children of alcoholics or adult children of addiction, whatever. And they were starting to speak that language. And I was like, oh my goodness. And when I really dove into my own recovery, I realized I was starting to get my voice back. And I really wanted to do something that I could help people with. If it was parents, if it was other people, just to listen to hear themselves. So I started the podcast just about a year ago, and the response has been great. Um,
Hmm.
we talk a lot about what it's like, what it feels like to be in these shoes, to really understand what we're going through, the struggles and the darkness and the pain, and sometimes how we crawl out of that, how we recognize our patterns and our programming, and how we change that voice, how we change that internal dialogue. And I think in my coaching as well, and I'm new to coaching, but I absolutely love working. I work a lot with women. I love the fact that when we start to open up and we start to speak about this stuff, that the shame gets quieter, the guilt gets quieter, and other things start to come up. The joy and the authenticity of our own selves, and you start to hear your true voice coming through. And I love being a witness to people finding that light, or that moment when they're like, oh, I get it. Like, I understand that now. And now I can do something about it. I can change that language. I can adopt skills and tools and strategies to really dig into the deep stuff, peel it back, and understand that that's not really who I am. Who I am is, I have so much more potential in this world to do bigger and better things. And you don't have to have a podcast to do that. You don't have to be a coach to do that. But just that realization helps you show up better in your relationships, helps you show up better for yourself, really putting yourself first, creating boundaries so that you can feel more peace in your life and joy. And honestly, I didn't know how to dream before I started doing this. I didn't understand that I could reach for things way bigger than I had capacity for. And so I think that's just part of it, is allowing myself and other people to start dreaming again and start realizing that all of this stuff we're hanging on to is not who we are. Who we are is so much brighter and lighter, and there's so much more love and joy in there. And if we start exploring and discovering that, and if sometimes that can just be listening to a podcast, like listening to the stuff can help you bring awareness. But once we start doing that, then we can actually move forward in our lives and create stuff that we are just desiring, and that we've kind of, things that have fallen to the wayside, really discovering who we are inside, right? And I discovered that I actually really like who I am, that I love the voice that I'm bringing, and I love the people that I'm attracting into my space, into my community. You know, people who have dreams and goals and desires, and who lift you up when you're down, or lift you up when you're up, you know? So I really love that part about the podcast and the coaching, and yeah, just, I think talking about it just helps people understand
Mm-hmm.
that we're really just not alone. We all have a lot of the same feelings, and it's okay to have those feelings. You can sit in it, but you don't want to live there. You can grow and do better things.
If you could speak to yourself 10 years ago during some of the darkest times, what would you say?
I would probably tell that girl that it's okay to let your guard down, and it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to do it all alone. You don't have to be this pillar of strength that you put out into the world when you're really crumbling inside, and that it's okay to not be okay. I think I lived so many years thinking that if I open up and tell people I'm not okay, my whole world will fall apart. And now I'm realizing that that is the exact opposite. That the minute I ask for help, or I start talking about the fact that I might not be okay, that's when real change and real joy and positive things come into your life. So I would tell that young girl to just, it's okay to let the walls down. You're not alone. Yeah, it's okay to ask for help.
Sharing your story, it brings hope and awareness, but I know when I talk about my stuff on air, it kind of makes me shake. Super anxious.
Mm-hmm.
But why do you continue to share? How do you stay brave enough to share?
Because I know there's a lot of people out there who just need to hear this message. There's so many people living in darker spaces that they need a voice to hear themselves or to know that they're not alone. Addiction and all of the things that go along with substance abuse, that's not just people who are using drugs and alcohol. This is such a broad span of things that are going on. I was addicted to food. I've been addicted to shopping. I've been filling my voids with different things. People are addicted to social media, to scrolling. It We're addicted to something so that we can avoid addressing what's really going on with us. And I think that once I started to talk and realize I had a voice, because I was so blocked in my throat for so many years, and I still get choked up and emotional too when I'm talking about it. And I think that's important because it means it's important to me. And I think I keep going because I know there's a lot of people out there who still aren't asking for help, who still are on that level of awareness, but they're afraid to go the next step. Or maybe they're afraid to walk down the stairs at a meeting. Maybe they're afraid to reach out to a friend and say, hey, I'm not in a good place. And if something I say on my podcast or in my coaching or online helps someone, then I'll keep doing it. Like, if I never make a dime at podcasting, I will still keep doing it because I love what I'm doing. And I think it's an important message. But if people want to find me, they can find me at KristaZaft.com. You can listen to my podcast, Becoming Sound. It's on Apple, Spotify, and I also have a YouTube channel under my name as well. So, and yeah, this has been awesome. And technical difficulties aside, it is always great to connect with people who have a very similar mission and who are just trying to bring hope and awareness and light into the world. And so that hopefully one day we can just keep tackling and overcome this whole addiction and the state of the world, right? Because it's not in a good place right now. So I really appreciate what you do too. I think what we're doing is important.
Yes, ma'am. I know so many family members. I love them dearly, and they go through the struggle just as you shared. And I know early on in my recovery, just learning that they have their own stuff that they go through too. It affects them, but I was not even aware that there was recovery for them as well early. And then, starting to get into counseling and stuff and learning more about the family system and what's available to them. And it's people like you that are willing to put it out there that's going to be a light in their darkness. And I again, thank you. And if this story moved you today, please share this episode. Look up Krista's website and check out her podcast. They're very inspiring. Thank you, Krista.